But do you anticipate any cases? Are there any out there on a federal level? Like I know today, maybe it was yesterday, the Texas Supreme Court basically reversed, said, okay, debt collectors and evictors have at it now. And I guess it was 2 days ago, the Wisconsin Supreme Court said, yeah we've decided, in our medical opinion, it's fine for people to go and open up bars. Do you anticipate anything like that on a federal level, or is it just that the Trump administration is not being aggressive enough that it would cause any Republicans to go and, I guess, say, hey, we need to be able to evict people or to allow them to, infect other people? Right.
Yeah, I sure hope not. I mean, the Wisconsin Supreme Court is an unusually ideological Supreme Court. It's an elected court. The elections, even though technically the judges don't run as Democrats or Republicans, everyone knows who the Democrat is, everyone knows who the Republican is, and they're very partisan. And the Republicans on that court are extraordinarily partisan. So I don't know that it's likely that many other judges are going to do what the Wisconsin Supreme Court did. I sure hope that we don't see a lot of that. One hopeful sign is there was a case that was just before the U.S. Supreme Court with the extraordinary name Friends of Danny DeVito v. Wolf. It's not the famous Danny DeVito. It's that guy who's running for the state Senate. But anyway, in the Danny DeVito case, this was challenging Pennsylvania's stay-at-home order. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court had allowed that order to stick around. Justice Alito asked for a bunch of additional briefing in the case, and so there were some fears that the U.S. Supreme Court might step in, and then the court just silently issued an order saying, nope, we're not stepping into this one. So the only signal we've got from the U.S. Supreme Court is in that Danny DeVito case where they seem to say, okay, we're staying out of this for now. And hopefully they will continue to stay out of this for now because we want these decisions being made by public health officials and not by lawyers.
Right. I mean, I just want to put a final point on this. The idea that a court, a Supreme Court, a federal Supreme Court, but any Supreme Court, as far as I can tell, would contravene the government's findings about health in this situation seems to me, if you can find that, it seems to me that there is nothing that the government can do that is safe from this type of attack, right? I mean, because if you as a government can't have, and obviously you need to be able to make the case that it is, we have a pandemic. You obviously can't pretend we have a pandemic. But if you as a government can't say, because of this pandemic, our scientists say we need to stay at home to protect the citizenry, if you as a government can't do that, according to a Supreme Court, how could you possibly say everybody should have health insurance? How could you possibly say really just about anything that a government could do could be overturned in this way?
Yeah, I mean, I think what underlies the Wisconsin Supreme Court's decision is this broad anti-government ideology. If you read the opinion, the thrust of what the court is saying is it's saying that the order was the stay-at-home order in Wisconsin was handed down by the head of the state health department, who isn't an elected official, who is was appointed by the governor. And so the argument is this is just too much power to put in the hands of one person, especially an unelected official. And I mean, that is often a persuasive argument. But what I think a lot of these courts are, getting wrong is that, yes, government power can be really scary. And the fact that we give a lot of power to individual government officials can be very frightening. I think anyone who's ever been subject to police misconduct will tell you that. But sometimes you need government. Sometimes you need the government to do something. I mean, imagine if there was an invading army. Is a court going to step in and say, well, allowing this general to send troops to stop this invading army, that's just giving way too much power to this one unelected general? No. I mean, government power can be really scary, but it doesn't take away from the fact that sometimes we need the government to act, and sometimes the government is the only thing that can protect us. And these judges, I think, aren't seeing this as a balance between two competing values here. The only thing they see is, oh, government's scary, we got to stop it.
Right. All right. Well, with that said, let's move on to now that we're talking about the power of one individual, there were some really important cases that the Supreme Court heard this week regarding presidential immunity. Break those down for us.
Sure. So this is the lead case is Trump v. Mazars, which is the House subpoenaed Trump's accounting firm, Mazars USA, and then they also subpoenaed several banks. And they're seeking records, some of Trump's financial documents, probably including his tax returns. Different committees are seeking it for different reasons. I think the House Intelligence Committee wants those documents because they're concerned about the possibility of foreign interference in elections. And so they want to see if there's any evidence there that Trump was working with Russian oligarchs, that he was helping them to launder money, or that there's some other reason to fear that there might be a Russian tie there that could have led to interference with the election. So they're conducting this investigation. Trump doesn't want them to get the document, so they sued. And the legal standard, I mean, every case that you can read on Congress's power to issue subpoenas says that the power is very broad. Congress can issue a subpoena on any matter on which legislation can be had. You know, the idea is that if Congress is going to pass a bill, they want to know what they're talking about first, so they can investigate anything they need to know in order to inform the legislative process. And then, you know, if they're considering, like, how can we prevent the Russians from interfering in our elections, they can gather information on that and then, you know, decide what to do with it. Trump stepped in and said, no, I should be immune from this. His Justice Department stepped in and said, no, the president is special and needs to give special immunity to the president. And based on the oral argument, I think it's likely that the court is going to say, yeah, the president is special. And the punchline is that we're probably not going to see these documents, if at all, for a really long time.
And I mean, what's the reasoning here? Like, how do they justify saying that, you know, these loans about Deutsche Bank or, you know, the accounting firm stuff is not relevant to oversight and investigations that the Congress is doing?
So their strongest argument is that, you know, basically the president has a lot going on. And
really, Ian? Really?
Yeah, I mean, that's their argument.
Theoretically, right? The president has a lot going on.
I mean, well, the argument, I mean, I'm trying to present it in the most sympathetic light possible.
No, I know. I'm just giving you grief. Yeah. No, but yes. Yeah. Theoretically, yeah. A president has a lot going on. They're not, you know.
Right,
and,
yeah. So, yeah, the theory is like, pretend that we had a president who doesn't spend his mornings live tweeting Fox News.
Right.
The theory is that the presidency is a very important job, and the person who holds that office shouldn't be distracted by all of these investigations that take up a bunch of the president's time, and that's time that they should be spending, you know, doing things like fighting coronavirus. So that's the argument. There are a lot of problems with that argument. One problem with that argument is that it's been made before. It was made in Clinton v. Jones, the Paula Jones case. Paula Jones was one of the bit players in what became the Monica Lewinsky affair.
Right.
She sued Bill Clinton, claiming, I think, that he sexually harassed her.
Yep.
And the question in that case was whether Bill Clinton should be immune from civil suits. And Bill Clinton made the same arguments that Trump's Justice Department is making now, that, look, like, I'm the president, I've got a lot of important stuff I'm doing, and while I am president, I shouldn't be distracted by a civil lawsuit. And, the Supreme Court didn't just say, no, you can be sued. The Supreme Court said unanimously, nope, you can be sued. And so, maybe you think Clinton v. Jones was wrongly decided. Like, maybe you look back on that and you say, well, gosh, like that really did wind up taking up a bunch of Clinton's time because of being impeached. But it just seems extraordinary to me that when a Democratic president made that argument, the Supreme Court unanimously said, no, you're not above the law. And when a Republican president makes the same argument, all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, maybe we were wrong about that.
And let's also be clear here. I mean, and I don't mean I am not downplaying the nature, what Paula Jones alleged here, but in our society, I think we have a fairly broad understanding that a civil suit is generally less urgent and less compelling than a criminal suit. Right? I mean, on some level, right? I mean, and a criminal investigation. And that's what, when they're looking for, Trump's, loans and, perhaps money laundering and et cetera, they're in pursuit of something that's like criminal. And I can understand on one level, like if it's argued, okay, we think this is just a fishing expedition. There's no rationale for what you're doing, or there's no legislative purpose for it. If they could prove that, that's one thing. But to say a blanket, no, this is too time consuming, and there's no public interest in this. And I don't mean just by actual like entertainment value, but rather like a serving the public in some fashion is just. It's ludicrous.
Yeah. Well, and I'll point, I mean, like the line that everyone likes to quote is, James Madison, the Federalist Papers, when he was describing the kind of government we would have, he said, ambition must be made to check ambition. Like the theory behind the U.S. separation of powers is that you have three separate branches of government, and like the people who are members of Congress are going to be ambitious. They're gonna want to get a sexy new job, and one way that they can get a sexy new job is if they're constantly investigating the president and like looking for stuff that makes the president look bad because that benefits their selfish personal interests. And I mean, you may think that's bad. I mean, I lived through the Benghazi hearings. I lived through a lot of frivolous congressional investigations. But the job of a Supreme Court is not to say, well, do I think it's a good idea for Congress to have this power? It's to enforce the Constitution we have.
Right.
And the Constitution we have was designed on the premise that it is a good thing that the President of the United States will constantly have to be looking over his shoulder if someone wants to take him down. And that it is a good thing that because people are able to investigate and people are able to frustrate the president might be more careful. That is the theory of our Constitution. And maybe you think it's wrong, but if you think it's wrong, judge isn't the right job for you, because when you're a judge, you just have to follow what it says.
All right, and so and again, we will know more about that, and a lot of this stuff is in terms of like obviously this has relevance going forward into the future. Although I imagine if we have a Republican Congress and a Democratic president, they'll go back to the Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court is constructed as is, they will find a way to make this happen. Now, and of course, we don't know the ruling on this, but this is going to have, if Donald Trump wins a second term, this is going to have big implications, right? I mean, because then all of a sudden it's like all investigations are off. I mean, there's no, if we can't investigate anything, we can't investigate anything.
Yeah. So I should be fair here in that, like, I don't think that the Supreme Court is likely to say this investigation is shut down. There can be no subpoenas, period. I think what the court is fairly likely to do is say, like the president has to have some extra protection, so we're going to lay out a bunch of new, never before stated protections that the president has, and now we're going to send it back to the lower courts, and the lower courts can spend months relitigating the case to see if these protections, if the House has jumped through the right hoops and has overcome these protections. And it may be that after months or years of additional